independence matters, independent thought. If we're going to be doing our jobs well as teachers, the thing we need to do is help every individual student be able to connect to reality on their own, to think independently. We're self-sovereign social animals. That means we need to really develop the self-sovereign aspect. Social, look through history, that to some extent, unfortunately, kind of happens automatically. It's the ability to think independently that we really need to work on and develop. Of course, and then once we do that, then we can get things where we can work on the social better. Improving things, serving as a governor or check on some things socially, making sure we're all in touch with reality and we know what's going on. But the independent thing we need to do, that's one thing that allowed Galileo to do what he did and to revolutionize science and to correct how it's done, to fix the method. We should be doing this in science, in education in general. We have a responsibility as teachers to our students to help them live a good life, to be happy on their own, so they can have the contact with reality and the understanding and the confidence and strength to help other people well also. Help their friends and family, help the people they care about and love, help society, instead of just being cogs in a wheel or something. Galileo thought this. It's what allowed him to be successful. What did Madame Curie do? Did she go and ask a bunch of people, do a survey, or read a bunch of books, or sit making stuff up? No. She was in reality, immersed in it, looking at substances and going through this long process of concentrating a substance so she could study radioactivity. As I talked about before, Richard Feynman learned when he was young to focus on reality and think independently and not get lost in words. He even did that again later in life. He didn't know that he was doing the same thing, but in the movie Infinity, as I've talked about before, there's a scene in a park from when he's 6, and I'll post this stuff, post a link to the video again, post this dialogue, but he and his dad are walking in a park, and young Richard says, "What kind of a bird is that?" His father says, "Marvelous bird." Then young Richard says, "But what's its name?" And his father says, "Richie, I could tell you its name if I knew it, and all the languages in the world. But then you just know what people call it in different places. You wouldn't learn anything about it. You gotta look at the bird. You gotta listen to the bird. You gotta try to understand what it's doing. You gotta notice everything." That is so damn beautiful. Giving young Richard a life and a mind and helping him unlock things he later used to get science and get a Nobel Prize in physics and to be connected to the world and to improve himself when he made mistakes, which everyone does. He did some screwy things, but as everybody does, but hopefully he learned and got better, and that's one thing we need to do, to be committed to reality. That's how we're going to improve, by being committed to the truth. And Galileo had something similar. Oh, but yeah, later in life, Feynman, to be good at physics, got to a point where he thought he should keep up with the latest of everyone else. Then he just found his productivity decreased. He was so into trying to keep up with what everyone else was doing, he wasn't doing as much original work anymore. He wasn't as productive. He wasn't developing his own thoughts. He didn't have time for that. And so he noticed, whoa, he noticed that's what was happening, and noticed why. So he quit keeping up with much of it. I'm not sure to what extent. He must have kept up with some, but then he started delving back into his own work and got more creative and original and productive again. That's something to remember. We need to have an independent connection to reality. It should be developed. But as Galileo says here, this is in Discoveries and Opinions of Galileo, translated by Stillman Drake, in a long letter called The Assayer. when this was written, and I can put a link to the assayer so you can like read along on your own also. It's the assayer something. Do I have it here handy? Where's the assayer, the assayer, the assayer? The assayer, a letter to the illustrious and very reverend Don Virginio Corserini, if I read that right. My contact's a little blurry. But, whoops, page just fell out over my note. There. And again, I'll put a link so you can read it. What do I got this on? Internet Archive. Note, Web, Stanford, EDU, the assayer, but it can be looked up in different places, I'm sure. But, quote, okay, so first of all, in this part, Galileo is responding to Sarsi, S-A-R-S-I. And this starts on, I'm not sure what page of the PDF, but of course you can just do a search for the word wedded, W-E-D-D-E-D, and come to it. Oh, page 4 of the PDF here. Bottom right corner, there's the number 4. But Sarsi was a name, a synonym of Orazio Grassi, 1583-1654. In Italian, on Wikipedia it says, quote, an Italian Jesuit priest who is best noted as a mathematician, astronomer, and architect. He was one of the authors in controversy with Galileo Galilei on the nature of comets. His writings against Galileo were published under the pseudonym Sarsi, unquote. So, here is in the assayer Galileo responding to Sarsi. This is some interesting stuff. Again, like what Feynman said and did, what Madame Curie did, probably said also. I have to look more of her quotes and writings, look up more. But here, quote, in Sarsi, I seem to discern the firm belief that in philosophizing, okay, unquote. Of course, at this time, philosophy was considered to include everything, all learning. And, notice it's down to us today because when someone gets a advanced degree, it's a PhD, a Doctor of Philosophy. That's terminology still there. Even though you get a degree in physics, it's called a PhD. It doesn't mean a doctorate of physics. It means a doctorate of philosophy. So nowadays, philosophy is more technically, more conceived of in a more delimited way. But it used to be wisdom in general, knowledge about the universe, the material world, astronomy, math, biology, sociology, politics, ethics, logic, everything. But, so, philosophizing, reasoning, thinking. So, again, quote, in Sarsi, I seem to discern the firm belief that in philosophizing, one must support oneself upon the opinion of some celebrated author, as if our minds ought to remain completely sterile and barren unless wedded to the reasoning of some other person. Unquote. Amen. This is an important thing, a principle that should come up in the classroom every day and every year. We should teach people to think on their own and be independent, self-sovereign, social animals. Rational animals that are social. They should have independent contact with reality and know-how, content and method. Takes some logic and understanding of how we do things up here to know what the truth is. Quote, possibly he thinks that philosophy is a book of fiction, by some writer like the Iliad or Orlando Furioso, productions in which the least important thing is whether what is written there is true. Well, Sarsi, that is not how matters stand. Philosophy is written in this grand book, the universe, which stands continually open to our gaze, unquote. Just like you got to look at the bird. You got to listen to the bird. You have to understand. You got to try to understand what it's doing. You got to notice everything. Again, it's open up to our own independent gaze. That comes from Aristotle, who identified that all human reasoning must be placed second to direct experience, as Galileo stated it. I'll put a quote to that too, if I remember. Better late. It's come up in some other videos and stuff. But, note for myself. It's open to our gaze. That's one thing that Aristotle identified, that we can all be in contact with reality individually because we all have senses, experience. We can reason. Unlike other animals, we can reason. We have free will. We have volition. Other animals have perception, but not this rational aspect of their consciousness. Their consciousness can be highly developed in ways we don't even know yet. We still got to study that. A lot to learn. But they don't have some rational aspect as we do to generalize and conceptualize and put things together in the same way. It's not the same nature. But it's all based on the evidence of the senses, so we don't have to have some philosopher king or someone telling us what to do or what's true or what's the good. We can know it on our own. Because this grand book stands continuously open to our gaze. Okay. Quote, but the book cannot be understood unless one first learns to comprehend the language and read the letters in which it is composed. Unquote, of reality. Book being used metaphorically here. Quote, it is written in the language of mathematics. Unquote, to some extent. Quote, and its characters are triangles, circles, and other geometric figures without which it is humanly impossible to understand a single word of it. Without these, one wanders about in a dark labyrinth. Sarsi seems to think that our intellect should be enslaved to that of some other man. Unquote, very good way to put it. That should not be how we are educated and trained. We should train to be trained to be free, independent, and make chosen relationships with other people. Students shouldn't be limited to have to rely on someone else. Then we have bad things in history like Sparta, Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, communist China, communist Russia, the monarchies in medieval Europe. So, quote, Sarsi seems to think that our intellect should be enslaved to that of some other man. But even on that assumption, I do not see why he selects Tycho. Unquote, Tycho Brahe. Tycho Brahe, pronounced different ways. But in this regard, Tycho had a theory about the comets as well. That's kind of what Galileo is referring to. So, quote, Tycho could not extricate himself from his own explanation of diversity in the apparent motion of his comet. But now Sarsi expects my mind to be satisfied and set at rest by a little poetic flower that is not followed by any fruit at all. It is this that Giudice rejected when he quite rightly said that nature takes no delight in poetry. That is a very true statement, even though Sarsi appears to disbelieve it and acts as if acquainted with neither nature nor poetry. He seems not to know that fables and fictions are in a way essential to poetry, which could not exist without them, while any sort of falsehood is so abhorrent to nature that it is as absent there as darkness is in light. Giudice wrote that People who wish to determine the location of a comet by means of parallax must first establish that the comet is a fixed and real object and not a mere appearance. Since reasoning by parallax is indeed conclusive for real things, but not for apparent ones. Sarsi says that no author worth considering, ancient or modern, has ever supposed a comet to be a mere appearance. Unquote. Sorry, I bit my tongue a little bit. Quote, hence that his teacher, who was disputing only with such men, it did not aspire to victory over any others, did not need to remove comets from the company of mere images. To this I reply in the first place that for the same reason Sarsi might let Giudici and me alone, as we are outside the circle of those worthy ancient and modern authors against whom his teacher was contending. We meant only to address those men, ancient or modern, who try in all their studies to investigate some truth in nature. Bam. We meant to steer clear of those who ostentatiously engage in noisy contests merely to be popularly judged victors over others and pompously praised. Giudici, in the hope of doing something that would be welcome to men studious of truth, proposed with all modesty that henceforth it would be good to consider the nature of a comet and whether it might be a mere appearance rather than a real object. He did not criticize Father Grassi or anyone else who had not previously done this. Now Sarsi rises up in arms and passionately strives to prove that this suggestion is beside the point and false to boot. Yet, in order to be prepared for anything, lest the idea appear worthy of some consideration, he robs me of any possible credit by calling this, quote, an ancient notion of Cardan and Talasio, unquote, which his teacher disparages as a fantasy of feeble philosophers who had no followers. And under this pretense, without the least shame for his disrespect, he robs those men of their reputations in order to cover up a slight oversight of his teachers. But I must not neglect to show, for his benefit and in their defense, how implausible is his deduction that their science was poor from their having had few followers, unquote. So I'll read a few more paragraphs. Finish off this kind of context, and there's another good thing in here about independent thought. So, there's a lot to learn from this, as I say, beyond comets. Quote, perhaps Sarsi believes that all the hosts of good philosophers may be enclosed within four walls. I believe that they fly, and that they fly alone like eagles, and not in flocks like starlings. It is true that because eagles are rare birds, they are little seen and less heard, while birds that fly like starlings fill the sky with shrieks and cries, and wherever they settle, befoul the earth beneath them. Yet if true philosophers are like eagles, they are not unique like the phoenix. The crowd of fools who know nothing, Sarsi, is infinite. Those who know very little of philosophy are numerous. Few indeed are they who really know some part of it, and only one knows all, unquote, one with a capital O. In there, he is Christian, referring to one. The one is God. Quote, to put aside hints and speak plainly, and dealing with science as a method of demonstration and reasoning, capable of human pursuit, I hold that the more this partakes of perfection, the smaller the number of propositions it will promise to teach, and yet fewer yet will it conclusively prove, unquote. Well, I'll continue quote and go back later. So, quote, consequently, the more perfect it is, the less attractive it will be, and the fewer its followers. On the other hand, on the other band, let me see. It says band. On the other band of magnificent titles, I think it should be hand. On the other hand, magnificent titles and many grandiose promises attract the natural curiosity of men and hold them forever involved in fallacies and chimeras, without ever offering them one single sample of that sharpness of true proof, by which the taste may be awakened to know how insipid is the ordinary fare of philosophy. Such things will keep an infinite number of men occupied. And that man will indeed be fortunate who, led by some unusual inner light, can turn from dark and confused labyrinths in which he might have gone perpetually winding with the crowd and becoming ever more entangled. Unquote. I'll have to do a few links to this, because it looks like here's another typo or something. It says an infinite number, her, of men. Clearly something going on. Then a comma where it shouldn't be. It should be, and that man will indeed be fortunate who, comma, led by some unusual inner light, comma, but it says that man, comma, will indeed be fortunate who, comma, and so on. But good stuff in here to think about. What made Galileo successful, and what can we learn from it, and what should we do as teachers to help our students? Science in particular, reasoning in general, education in general. As it says here, science, to kind of paraphrase, science is a method of demonstration and reasoning capable of human pursuit. Everybody, because we all ask, most all of us, but it's known. What does a little kid do? Why? 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 It's a natural curiosity in everybody to know the causes of things and to know why things happen, to know the nature of things and what's going on in the world. We all, every one of us, loves knowledge because it helps us live, and we want to know what the world's like so we can live. That's why we're all learning on whatever level it may be. Like it said, capable of human pursuit. And as we said earlier, the universe stands continually open to our gaze. We should be doing that and not memorizing what other people say. We need to learn from others, yes. It's people who figured out some truth in the first place. We need to see what their truth was, the truth that they learned, and how, so we can go through the same process ourselves, not get carried away with what words are in some product out of context, out of nowhere, illogically. We should learn the product and the process. We should go through the reasoning ourselves, like a geometric proof. What are all the steps we need to go through from the evidence of the senses, from this book that's continually open to our gaze, to these other conclusions, as Galileo said of Aristotle. All human reasoning must be placed second to direct experience. Madame Curie did it. Feynman did it. Galileo did it. This is one thing that allowed Galileo to revolutionize science and make it good instead of all the nonsense that had been done before. Newton did some of the same stuff. So this is something we should read, study, make sense of. It's our responsibility, because people don't automatically think properly, reason properly, know how to engage in independent thought, get confidence in themselves. People can easily do like little kids and grab the pant leg of their parent for protection. It can be maintained in some other form or fashion later in life. Not just a pant leg, not just a parent, but holding on for security, not thinking for themselves, going out in the world and exploring, which every person should be doing for the love of life, to enjoy the world, to have fun, to be confident. Who's at the line of teaching that? Parents, yes. Teachers also. It's really a teacher's responsibility as a job, as a profession, as a function in a culture, to pass this forth, to make people strong, independent people. You know, be strong to be helpful, as we say in MoveNat, a fitness system. So I'll put a link to this. Something to remember, food for thought. Let's all do this in every subject we teach. Science, chemistry, history, whatever, fitness. we need to look at not what some people say, but, of course, not stop with that. That's not the beginning and end and middle and totality. We can learn, but as it says, and again, remember we were talking about here whenever he says philosophizing, he's talking about reasoning, being scientific, thinking, but we should, how shall I put this? We should fight what, like Sarsi says. So to quote Galileo, quote, in Sarsi, I seem to discern the firm belief that in philosophizing, one must support oneself upon the opinion of some celebrated author, as if our minds ought to remain completely sterile and barren unless wedded to the reasoning of some other person, unquote. No. Hell no. We should help people live and think and be good self-sufficient social animals so they can enjoy life and help other people. That's a responsibility in every subject. Thank you.